I didn't realize though that by being lazy, I would end up making more money. And that's kind of what peer group teaches you to do is to you only work on the things that you bring the most value to.
Welcome back to Center Stage Podcast. My name is Danny Decker. I have a really special guest here this week, Tom Fafinski. Tom is the co-founder of Virtus Law, an estate planning firm in Minneapolis, and he also leads the Epic Peer networking group, which we will talk about here shortly. So, Tom, thanks so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
Well,
Thanks for having me.
Let's start here, Tom. For our audience, let's just talk a little bit about your firm. You've been in business for a while. You've had a lot of
Yeah.
success, and so tell us about Virtus Law.
Yeah. Well, it's really an outgrowth of my practice from before I started in 1991, and which was a very bad recession. It was a jobless recovery, or the jobless recovery of following the 91 recession. I got out of law school. I had an offer at a subsidiary of Emerson, but I wanted to go into a big firm environment. And when the recession hit, I had no place to go. I hung a shingle. The customer or the place that I worked, the subsidiary of Emerson, became a client of mine, and I just, started doing a bunch of business technology type stuff in the 90s, and then so it was just kind of a general business practice with a little bit of estate planning. And then I sold it in '05. Somebody made me an offer I couldn't refuse. And so I sold it and I worked for the buyer kind of as commission only type thing, production and commissions. And then he did not run it great. And so he ended up owing me money. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go. And we did a cold start in 2010 with one of the lawyers that worked at the firm. He got hurt by the Great Recession, so that was a hard thing to navigate. So there was good reason for him not doing great, because 3 years after I sold it to him, the Great Recession hit. But in 2010, we did a cold start, didn't take any clients away. No open matters came over, and we just started. And I think our first year we did like 500-ish
Okay.
thousand, just the two of us, and we had one admin person. When I had sold it, I was in a peer group, like a non-industry peer group, locally, and they had asked me to start facilitating. So I started facilitating peer groups in 2008, and through peer group interaction and stuff like that, we were able to double the size of the firm pretty quickly.
Love it.
And now we're doing like, around 3 million, something like that. I work at the law stuff. I spend probably 60% maybe. And then in 2014, one of the large associations, it's called Wealth Council. It's a document generation system for estate planning lawyers. Asked me to come teach about business law to the estate planners because they taught me so much about being an estate planner. And so in the course of doing those, I think it was 2 days of CLEs, I mentioned my peer group that I was in, and a board member approached me and said, would you ever do a joint venture peer group for estate planning lawyers only, law firm owners only? And I was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so in 2015, Wealth Council Estate Planning Peer Group Solutions was born. And then in 2020, they said, hey, you're doing a great job with it. We want you to run with it. It's not our core deal, but we feel like it's in good hands with you and my law partner, Nathan. And so Epic started with a transition period. They helped us brand and all that stuff. And so in 2020, Epic started, but it's really an outgrowth of
Love it.
prior solution.
I love it. I want to jump back to kind of the first part of the story here because you
Yeah,
mentioned you built and successfully sold your first law
yeah,
firm. That
yeah,
that triggers something in my mind because we all know the vast majority of small law firms are really unfortunately never able to be sold.
Correct.
So what did you do differently all the way back then that enabled you to build something that had enterprise value beyond just yourself?
Yeah, I ran it as a business, so I wasn't contaminated by working at another law firm where those typical conditions that are placed on it were there. So I really kind of ran it as a business, and my peer group was filled with like plastic injection molding company, sheet metal fabricator, home builders, architects, and they had different models. And so I really kind of ran it more like a manufacturing facility where we depended on systems and processes and used non-lawyers to do non-lawyer work. And that there's a tendency for law firms to make lawyers do non-lawyer work, and it occupies your time and your headspace, and it's really not very fun. So what had happened was I owned a building, and one of the tenants approached me and said, I want to buy your firm, and I got an SBA loan. I'm working through the process of it. Would you ever sell it? And he made me, and he put the number out there, and I'm like, yeah, no, but would I be able? Because I was young, I was like 38 or something. Like, could I still work there? Oh yeah, no, no, we want you to stay. Well, their loan never came through, but in the process of that, I talked to a business broker about the value that they were offering to see if it was a good deal. He touched base with me 6 months later and said, how'd that ever go? And it never did go because they couldn't get their SBA funding and they're going to wait for that. And he said, well, I've got somebody that's interested in buying a law firm, and would you be interested? I'm like, sure. So that's kind of how it kind of evolved, but it was systems and processes.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And you said something that resonates with me, and also, a lot of our audience, a good percentage of our listeners are solos, some of them in quite the early stages of growing their firm. And so when you talk about lawyers doing non-lawyer tasks,
Yeah.
I have a suspicion that probably is resonating with a lot of folks in our audience. So, how can a lawyer who realizes he or she is doing a lot of non-lawyer tasks, how do they start transitioning out of that?
Well, you got to understand that the harder you work does not equal the more money you make. The harder you work normally means that you have become imprisoned by your firm and you've got a job. And so if you have a job, you own the job and you're doing fine and all that stuff, but you're not going to get that multiple, because the multiple is, one times revenue. If you've got systems and processes, it's one times revenue. It's 4, 5 times owner take home, and then you get some kickers for some recurring revenue. Recurring revenue is a big value add. And Danny, I didn't just sell my firm once. About 6 years ago, we started our transition to, because I'm 60 something years old, and we started the transition to my partner. He's still my partner in Epic, and so I did it twice, which is so it can be, people are like, that's a one-off. No, it's actually, you can do it. It's, if you just got to have it set up right.
Oh, love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Myself and my business partner, obviously we run a marketing firm, so it's different. But we read the book E-Myth by
Yeah.
Michael Gerber very, very early
Great
on.
book. Yeah.
And I highly recommend that for every solo small firm owner to read. And the exercise that it prompted us to take was literally sitting down and spending a couple weeks just auditing our time and just keeping a running list of what we are spending our time doing. And it's
Yes.
like, from again, in a marketer's, perspective, there are some of the things that I was spending my time on were very high level, strategic, messaging, like things that I should be doing. But also a shocking amount of time was spent on, things like, taking out the trash at the end of the week and, responding to emails that I don't need to be the one responding to. And what we did was we basically we prioritized, we ordered, we put in literal, what's the most important thing I'm doing and what's the least important thing I'm doing. And we just put a plan in place to get the lower value tasks off of our plate as quickly as we could. And I feel like a law firm owner, as an attorney, obviously there are certain things you've got to do, but there's probably a lot of things you could get off your plate.
Yeah.
And I mean, would you agree with that
Well,
thought
look, yeah,
process?
can I tell you a story about one of our members?
Please do.
So we go through these deep dives in these quarterly sessions. We do have a monthly version too, which is very similar, but it's short, it's virtual. But one of the members was talking about what a great team he had, how special his team was, how talented they were. But he was involved in every aspect of the estate plan delivery, from intake to final signing. And one of the members, and at the end we said, okay, you know, jump in and tell us what you would do if you were this person. I'll just say his name was Steve. It wasn't Steve, but if you were Steve, what would you do? And it came around to one of Steve's really good friends. And he said, you keep telling us about how great your team is, but I think your problem is you think you're really special, and you're just not that special. And you've got to get out of the way and provide runway for them. So it's kind of funny because the next quarterly meeting, his profits went way up. He
Love it.
implemented, his profits went way up. He brought T-shirts, and there was a picture of him, and it said, "I'm not special." And then he gave it to this other member, a T-shirt to the other member with his face on it, and he said, "Steve's not special." It's kind of funny. But the next quarter, so we're 6 months out, this person had a life-threatening medical crisis, and he was out for almost half a year because of this. And he's great now. He's doing fine now, and everything worked out, but we didn't think it was. His revenue grew when he was gone because of the systems that he put in place and the things that he did when that one member said, "You're not special." So, and that person now, his revenue in the last 5 years has grown 364%,
Wow.
and his profit so grew 364%. So that means, it's 464% of what it used to be. And his quarterly profit now, if you look at the first quarter that he was in and you compare it to now, it's 384% growth, which means, if he has $1, now he's got $484 or $100. He's got $484. So, it's doing stuff like that, putting systems in place and processes and delegating.
Yeah, I love it because the best part of that, I mean, amazing story. And, in that circumstance, the fact that he made himself no longer the bottleneck allowed the firm to run without him while he was, receiving medical care. At the same time, that type of thing is also what you need to do if you want to be able to sell your business someday. And
Absolutely.
and I'm sure you're on the same page, but one of the things I believe is that even if you don't want to sell, even if you have no plans in the short term to sell your business, it's also more fun to run a business
Yeah.
that's built to
Yeah.
sell because
Yeah.
it just doesn't, it's not all on your shoulders.
Yeah. I'm helping one firm member sell his practice, and his revenue is about almost 2 million. And he'll probably get about 2 million for it. He might get a little bit more. I think it's a little bit more. The investment banker that's on it doesn't think it's quite that high. But this guy's says he runs his company he's a pilot on a 737. He's got devices all over and measures metrics, and it's just beautiful. I mean, it's just so impressive, so gorgeous.
Love it.
But that is, yeah.
So tell us about Epic, the peer group you've put together.
Yeah, so, it's really built for that law firm owner who realizes that the harder they work, the more they're trapped. And they're ready now. They kind of get that idea that I'm ready to do something different. I am tired. My practice does, my personal practice does almost 2 million a year, pretty close to 2 million. And as I told you, I work 60% on the law firm stuff. The other time I spend on peer group and I have another business too that I play around with a little bit. in the real estate world, and we're investing, real estate investing. But when you realize that, and my income has never been higher. When I worked, like when I was younger, I was working 11 hours a day, 10, 11 hours a day. My spouse was unhappy with how much time I was spending, and I was unhappy with how much time I was spending. And you get to a breaking point, and you're like, I just can't do it anymore. I didn't realize, though, that by being lazy, I would end up making more money. And that's kind of what peer group teaches you to do is to you only work on the things that you bring the most value to. And if other people can do it, then you have other people do it. If systems can do it, you have systems do it. AI is just making things explode now for uh, owners. And so when they're tired, they don't have life balance. They feel like they're working tons and tons of hours and not getting rewarded for it. You probably see it a lot, Danny, because you come in and you help firms get more business. And they're like, that's what we need. We need more business. We need more. And you do a great job of that. They get a bunch of revenue coming through the door now. And now they gotta cook it. They're no longer hunting. Now they're just farming and they're cooking this stuff and they're working harder and harder. Have you had people come to you and say, Danny, I can't do any more right now. You're bringing in too much work?
We have that problem frequently, and you said it, and it shows up in two places. It shows up one in the actual production, but it also will show up from time to time in intake. And one of the things we've learned is if a firm does not have sales and intake systems in place, they may think that they need more leads, but giving them more leads actually just drowns the intake and it doesn't even make it. So that's why I love what you guys are doing. Yeah, I think it's so important because again, I think a lot of law firm owners feel like what they need is more business. But to your
Yeah.
point, then they get it and they realize, whoa, we don't have the systems in place and it burns us out.
Yeah, I mean, they're just working harder. They're like, oh, great, this is more revenue. But now think about a new plateau. So maybe they were doing $1 million and now they're doing 1.5 million, but they're working their tails off and they're like, I just can't do this anymore. What, if you combine what you do by bringing more revenue in for them and what Epic Peer Group, it's not curriculum, it's not a coaching program, it's collaboration. You're meeting with other law firm owners in different geographic areas. So they're not your competitors. We'll have, St. Louis, Seattle, Fort Lauderdale, Toledo, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, Boston. We have they're all over the country and they come down and meet once a quarter for 2 days. And then there's another solution where it's monthly, but you're never meeting with your competitors. And you've grown to love these people. I mean, they're your friends. Some of these members have been in there for 10 years and they
Yeah.
just love each other, and you're helping your friends and they're helping you. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
No longer when you're doing a brochure, like something simple like a brochure with AI, maybe it's a little bit quicker, but you spend an hour and a half, 2 hours like revising, editing, and all that stuff. But somebody who's in San Diego, I'm in Minnesota, so somebody in San Diego says, yeah, why don't you just use mine? And I'm like, oh, look at it, and like, huh, all right, let's put our brand over that and we're done. Because I agree with everything. I think it's gorgeous. Maybe I'll tweak something, but I'm done in 5 minutes rather than 5 hours. And
I love
that's
it.
the acceleration principles of peer group. Now,
I
I
love
know
it.
AI is going to change the brochure thing, but
No, it makes it a whole lot of sense, and we had the opportunity. You graciously invited us to participate in one of
yeah,
your sessions. Had the opportunity to speak, and so I picked up on that vibe. I could tell this felt like a community, and that's awesome. So one of the questions I have, Tom, is you talked about within the group, you help systematize
yeah.
and really create processes so that the firm can run without being completely dependent on the lawyer. Do you feel like estate planning as a practice area like uniquely lends itself to that approach, or do you think there are principles here that
No,
our family attorneys that are listening to this and immigration attorneys that are listening to
yeah.
this, can they take that same mindset into their practice?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when I first started in peer group, I was just a general business firm. We did some litigation. We did um, general corporate law. We realized through the process of being in a peer group that if we niched in a particular industry and became a dominant player in that industry, that we could really do well. We do a lot of work with managed service providers that outsource networking, not outsourced networks like the
Yep.
IT infrastructure networking stuff, not the networking of meeting people, and estate planning. And those are the two things that our 8 lawyers do, and we generate, three something million doing it. And actually, we're 7 lawyers. I think we're 7 lawyers. And I work totally remotely, so I don't ever go to the office, and it's all because of systems and processes that we have in place. Um, and yeah, no, you could do that anywhere. I did it when it was just a general business practice. Niching is really so. If you got like a family law person, it's like okay, not just niche in family law, but niche inside of a niche inside of family law. You're going to get better returns for it. But yeah, it works for everything. Works
I,
for
I,
sheet metal fabrication, plastic injection molding.
I love it. Love to hear that. And I also love what you said at the end there around, a niche focus. And, we're beating that drum from a marketing perspective because from a marketing perspective, it's just, I mean, it's so much easier and you can be so much more effective with your marketing when you can
Right.
target in on a very specific type of clientele with a very specific problem, with very specific hopes, dreams, all of this.
Yeah.
But that's only the first part of the conversation, right? Because then there's all the efficiencies that you create when you are able to niche your operation, right? So because obviously if you have to reinvent the wheel every single time because today you're dealing with a DUI and tomorrow you're dealing with a divorce and the next day you're putting an estate plan together, it's pretty hard to systematize something like that. Would you agree?
It is. It is. In the value, we do most of our members do flat fee pricing, and a lot of our members are generating hourly rates of $1,000 an hour because of the systems and process, not because they're doing anything different from the legal work or the pricing on the legal work, but just because of the systems and processes and technology. You got to have technology in place. So the thing that's really cool about any law firm that is niched like that, the firms that you serve, they are not plagued by what you're plagued by. You are plagued by being an international player, certainly a national player and an international player. And so you can't join a peer group of other international law firm marketing platforms because you guys compete. You wouldn't share anything. You'd be there to try to learn from them. So it corrupts the opportunity to share. So the sharing is where it's at, and because people are not in the law firm world are not competing nationally,
Yeah.
um,
That
that's
makes
why
so
it
much
works.
sense. And side note, we actually are part of a marketing peer group, but as you pointed out, it's not legal specific because it would then be, all competitors in a room. It happens to be there's about 300 marketing agencies that are members of this thing in all different verticals. And
Oh,
so,
good for you.
I can tell you from, personal experience that this stuff really works.
Good for
And some of the
you.
examples that you just shared have the same where it's like, wow, like a recent example is we're working on some new dashboard reporting software for our clients, and we sat down and we're getting ready to kind of reinvent the wheel, and we realized, hey, let's see what everybody else in this group is doing, and we had a couple calls, and it's like, yeah, let's just do what he's doing because we like that, and now we don't have to spend 30 hours reinventing that wheel.
Dashboarding is really important. It is so critical for law firm growth. Um, the the ability to say, okay, these are the metrics that I really need to monitor, and how am I doing compared to my peers? So now you go to your peer group and we throw them all together and we generate a comparative so you can see how you're doing against the group averages. And so if your rent uh, per percentage uh, of gross revenue is 4%, you don't know if that's good or bad. But when you throw it into the comparative dashboard and you see that, no, that's actually, don't work on your rent if it's 4% of gross revenue. Work on something else. It tells you where to go. There are some indicators that are like beautiful, like revenue per full-time employee is just gorgeous. It drives everything. It doesn't bring in compensation, so then we do revenue per salary dollar as well. But the combination of those two pieces talks about, do you have enough hands in play? Are the hands efficient? Here I'm going to stat revenue per full-time employee um, quarterly has grown by 49% for peer group members. So if they were doing $100,000 of revenue per quarter per employee, they now do 149,000 in revenue per employee per quarter. And it's just and that you're like, well, Tom, that's just an anomaly. I went and back tested it over the 5 years that we've been doing the comparative. We used to do it by hand, but then we built a system out of Power BI that does it for us now. So it removes any inaccuracies. And it's 46% over that 5 year period. So it's like real. It's
Love
real
it.
stuff, and revenue per employee is so critical. You develop a strike zone of, oh my gosh, I've got X dollars in revenue per employee, and that's really high. Um, I remember the last time we were at that number, my team started to burn out, and it tells you, hey, it's time to hire. And then you hire from below normally. You build the foundation wider and bring it up.
I
Uh,
love it.
and if it gets too low, then you're like, oh, I got too many people here. I need to look at either increasing my revenue, focusing on that, or decreasing my staff. We call it strike zone. Um, and it's,
That's so good. Tom, I can tell we are really just scratching the surface here.
oh my gosh, yeah.
Just a wealth of knowledge and experience that you've had, not to mention the success of selling not one, but two firms. So for folks that are listening to this and want to know how to connect with you, maybe they're interested in Epic, where should they go? What should they do?
Yeah, www.epicpeergroup.com, EPIC peergroup.com. And, or you can call me, 612-865-1700. That's my cell phone number. And I normally don't answer unless I recognize the number, but it'll get into our system then. And I think Epic actually has a separate telephone number too, but yeah, no, I'd be happy to talk. If you're just starting, the right fit group is really important. So we don't put somebody in, like today I have a peer group meeting and there are members that are doing $5 million. I can't put somebody in that group that's doing 250 a year. So it just not going to work for the person doing 250, and it's not going to work for the person doing 5 million. So the beauty of what Epic does is we break it out into groups that are right fit. We have primary drivers who are primary to everything. We have business operators who start letting go, and enterprise leaders who now are piloting a ship, you know.
That makes so much sense. Tom, this was great. I'm gonna ask one last question to kind of
Yeah.
leave our audience with here. So since we're kind of at the end of the end of 2025, 2026 is right around the corner. I'm not 100% sure when this episode is going to drop, but if there's sort of one piece of advice you could share with small law firm owners going into 2026, what would you leave them with?
I would leave them with how we theme our quarters. And I think it's really important in the first quarter, especially for law firms, to work on your marketing and sales. It's just really important because it sets the tone for the year. And Q1 is really normally a pretty slow quarter for most. And then you look at Q2 and you say, okay, I'm going to work on my production systems and get them in place, because what happens in Q3 is everybody takes vacations in Q3 and you need those systems and processes to carry you through. And then in Q3, I would focus. So build your rocks out for those themes, finance and administration, monitoring, and so that you can right the ship in Q3 if something needs to change, or if you need to adapt. If more revenue is coming in than you expected, then you have to make changes. And then you'd really deserve the fourth quarter to not just finish out the year strong, but really contemplate what you're going to do in the following year. And you do that year after year. We do that year after year. It's not that you can't bring other topics other than the themed topic, but when you work on it year after year after year, you just start building this beautiful structure that is balanced and even and appropriate and saleable.
Fantastic. Wonderful advice. Tom, thank you again for coming on Center Stage and sharing your experience with our audience.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Danny.